woman, it doesn't matter. They don't have a, they don't make love. They don't, to them sex is not about bonding and loving and closeness with the one you care about. It's purely just, the sexual organs are a device to get what I want.
Right, and well, we can understand that there's a lot of child abuse and satanic and Luciferian connotations with the New World Order, and obviously this is where psychopaths are home. Really, I mean, it's a candy store for them, really, isn't it?
Well, let me tell you a very interesting story that ties in with that. And, this is like something that kind of interests me, but it always interests me in the past, how the elite and how, like, the rich people, especially saw this when I was on Wall Street, how they had a completely different standard of morality than most normal people, even if they were sort of like on the high moral ground preaching. That's very psychopathic, just to do one thing and say another. But about 1997, not long before I came back to live in Ireland, I was working for an investment bank in Upper Manhattan, in Rockefeller Center, funny enough. It was actually a consulting firm, sorry. And I used to work the night shift there because I used to pay an awful lot more for graphic designers working overnight. I'd liaison with offices around the world, so that's why they had a night shift. There was a lot of the guys who used to work as temps at night, who used to work with me, were nearly all gay guys, and many of them were actors. Or, they were trying to get into Broadway and stuff like that, and musicals. And there was one guy there called Mark, and I'll never forget, one weekend he comes in, we were talking about what did you do on the weekend, and he says, you won't believe what I did. And I says, what? He says, on Friday night, some guy, like a very rich-looking guy, came up to us in a club in Manhattan and says, do you want to spend the weekend at a ranch outside San Francisco? And he was like, well, yeah, and they would get paid for it, and all they had to do was go there and sort of be like, I guess kind of like Rent Boys, or just kind of like Rent a Crowd, but a gay version of it. And then then he was telling us, so what was it like? He says, you wouldn't believe it. We went to this place that was like in the woods north of San Francisco, and they had like all the rich people there. I saw Schwarzenegger there. This is when he was still an actor. And he says, I saw like loads of politicians, off TV there. And he goes, and they had this weird, effed up, this was the language he used, musical, where they burned fire in front of a big huge owl in the middle of a lake. And I didn't realise it at the time until years later, till I saw the video. He was talking about Bohemian Grove.
God.
And and this is like, and we were all laughing at him. We didn't believe him at the time. We were like, oh, come on, you're making it up. And he said it was just literally the top people in America going around having sex with anyone they could find, male or female. Everyone was drunk. There were tables full of cocaine, and he told me that they'd have things like bare knuckle boxing, and all these politicians would be watching it, and then it culminated at the end of the weekend, and then in this big ritual, which we know about. We've seen the video of the burning of the owl, Molech, whatever it's called.
That's right, yeah.
And and this was years before I ever even heard there was such a thing as Bohemian Grove, and he'd been there, and he said it was just debauchery like he'd never seen. And this guy Mark, he was a beautiful guy, he was a lovely guy. I mean, we were really good friends, but he was sort of like a hardcore gay guy. He was in like the Lower West Side New York kind of scene, and he said even by his standards it was intense. So what does that tell you?
Well, that ceremony that they do in Bohemian Grove is called the cremation of care. And there's obviously, people who know about the New World Order know about Bohemian Grove and what goes on there, because of the Alex Jones footage of what he managed to take. And you have the burning of the effigy of supposed to be a human sacrifice under the statue of Moloch, which is obviously satanic, So that's quite frightening and shocking. But, you have to ask yourself, if this is what's going on in Bohemian Grove, and these are our leaders, politicians, ministers, we have some beeping noise going on there.
Yeah.
Okay, we're back with Thomas Sheridan, the author of a book called Puzzling People, The Labyrinth of the Psychopaths. We're just talking about psychopaths. Thomas, just while the music was on there, we said we'd go in and start talking about psychopaths in relationships. Can you kind of go into more detail about that for us?
Yeah, a psychopath in a relationship is how most people will encounter them. They'll meet this person, either a man or a woman, and the old adage, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. They will sweep you off your feet like you wouldn't believe. They will flatter. It begins with flattery. They'll tell you they're the most beautiful woman in the world they've ever met, the most handsome man. They'll tell you you're sexually incredible. They'll seduce you. They'll flatter you. They'll pump you full of expensive gifts. They will never. You'll actually believe you've met someone who's your soulmate. They tell you almost immediately they're in love with you. They want to get married and have children. A common thing they do is as soon as they meet a person, which we'll call a target, as soon as they target someone, they will tell that person, literally after meeting them in no time, they'll be talking about, when we're old people together, we'll be chasing each other around in the old people's home in the wheelchairs. And they'll be doing this with a couple of people at the same time. This is what they're like. They have the incredible sexual stamina, again, because of they're hardwired for sex, but they don't enjoy sex the way a normal person does. Their sexual lives are based on power and control, and also to fill a need for excitement. Many of them suffer from that you all suffer from incredible amounts of boredom. They get bored like you wouldn't believe, because they've no inner emotional life. They're constantly bored, and they constantly have a need for excitement. And this is why they will have sex with over the course of their lives with hundreds and even sometimes thousands of people. They will just be constantly having sex, and they're not fussy. A male psychopath, it's a very common thing for a male psychopath who's in a relationship with a woman to leave her for a man. I get a lot of emails about that, the whole phenomenon of the gay husband. Now, what they do is they pretend they're suddenly, they might see a guy who has more money than their wife, and they'll suddenly pretend they're gay, and then they'll instantly leave their wife for this guy, and then they'll try to play the whole phony gay liberation thing of I was a gay man trapped in a marriage. Now, I know that's actually, in an unpathological sense, that does happen. That not so much in these days. Well, it shouldn't really happen much these days, not in the West anyway. But they will actually make up a story that like, oh, I was a gay man and I was living a lie, but they weren't. They were just psychopaths. They just found a new person to prey on. And this person happens to be.
Yeah, but they wouldn't go and actually have a physical relationship with this person, would they?
Oh, well, yeah, any orifice will do.
Serious?
They will, and the gay man, and I've actually emails from gay men who've actually been in this situation, and they would never have guessed that the guy was straight before they were with them.
That's incredible.
Oh yeah, they're asexual. Any orifice will do. Man, woman, it doesn't matter. They don't make love. They don't to them sex is not about bonding and loving and closeness with the one you care about. It's purely just, the sexual organs are a device to get what I want.
Right, and well, we can understand that there's a lot of child abuse and satanic and Luciferian connotations with the New World Order, and obviously this is where psychopaths are home. Really, I mean, it's a candy store for them, really, isn't it?
Well, let me tell you a very interesting story that ties in with that. And, this is like something that kind of interests me, but it always interests me in the past, how the elite and how, like, the rich people, especially saw this when I was on Wall Street, how they had a completely different standard of morality than most normal people, even if they were sort of like on the high moral ground preaching. That's very psychopathic, just to do one thing and say another. But about 1997, not long before I came back to live in Ireland, I was working for an investment bank in Upper Manhattan, in Rockefeller Center, funny enough. It was actually a consulting firm, sorry. And I used to work the night shift there because I used to pay an awful lot more for graphic designers working overnight. I'd liaison with offices around the world, so that's why they had a night shift. There was a lot of the guys who used to work as temps at night who used to work with me